السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت، الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on the state of Islam. For may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the beginning of Surah Al-Mulk, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. Blessed is the one who has the one in whose hand the authority of all the dominion subhanahu wa ta'ala. وهو على كل شيء قدير, as he had the power over all things, over everything subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the beginning of this ayah of Surah Al-Mulk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructing us for the believers or for anybody else to reflect on the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how the things are working and how the things are subhanAllah set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the whole kingdom and He has subhanAllah, as I said, He said blessed, and blessed is the one in whose hand all the dominion. The blessing here goes to everything that is good and everything that is perfect is an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ, the one who created death and life. As He said, as you see here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the dominion of everything. He had the kingdom of everything. He is the creator of everything. Now the believer, by this perception and this concept, by reading such a thing, it needs to induce in their heart that confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who owns everything. Now what is related to the human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the death and the life. And the death in it you see, or from which is manifested one of the great attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the absolute power, absolute ability. The same for the life. However, for the death, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He said, خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ, and the maut is the beginning and the life is the end. Which is mean, when you look at the life of a human being, it has, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Ghafir, those who appear pleading and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness after everything it was too late. قَالُوا رَبَّنَا أَمَتَّنَا اثْنَتَيْنِ, Oh Allah, you have caused us to die 2 times and you have caused us to live 2 times. If there's any way out. So we know that we have been dead and we came to this life, and then we're going to die again, and then we're going to get back to life. So then the beginning is life, and we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created death and then life, because the life is what is going to be as in eternity by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will. But in the attribute of the creation of the death, not only the absolute ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifested, He's the one who creates death. Imagine whoever can create death except the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala, because who's the one who's alive, he's subject to death. And then it manifests through this attribute, the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of Al-Qahhar, the dominant subhanahu wa ta'ala, that everything subhanallah is under His domination. Everything, like subhanallah, He prevails over all His creation, the subduer, the irresistible, the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because everyone has a choice, everyone can change things, everyone can alter things in their life, and that's what they can control. But when it comes death, nobody can have nothing to do with death. When death comes, that's it. It comes to life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and He created the life. And then the creation of the life also, from which manifests the great attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of His great ability, but through which also is manifested the attribute of the absolute knowledge. When Allah creates creation, everything He created in the perfect, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the perfect fashion, He fashioned it, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the answer of Musa to Fir'aun when he told him, who is your Lord? قَالَ الَّذِي خَأَطَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. The one who bestowed upon everything its creation, then give it His guidance. Bestow upon a creation, it's like more profound than to say created, because bestow upon has all the elements related to that creature, what it needs from subhanAllah, the way that they can, stand on their own, or they live, and everything related to their life from the beginning to the end. So it has the absolute knowledge. And then through which is also manifested the great attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gift and favor upon His creation. So you see, these 2 elements that related to the human being are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ, to test you. Who among you is best in deeds? لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Therefore, when you look at this life, all this life is between 2 points. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned them in one word, ثُمَّ. قال الله سبحانه كيف تكفرون بالله وكنتم أمواتا فأحياكم ثم يميتكم ثم يحييكم ثم إليه ترجعون. That ثم subhanallah is very like in 2 letters which define the life that we live from birth to death. But this whole subhanallah life is 1 day or a half of a day. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the end of Surah Al-Mu'minun, and in many ayat, when they've been asking each other in the hellfire, they will be saying, كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ عَدَدَ سِنِينَ. How long have you, stayed or lived on earth? Years. He said, years? We only stayed like a day or a few days, or a half a day. Ask those who used to count. Here in the tafsir are the angels. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Taha said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather the mujrimeen, the criminal all together, قَالَ يَتَخَافَتُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِلَّا بِثْتُمْ إِلَّا عَشْرًا. They will be whispering to each other, we only stayed in this worldly life only 10 days. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we know what they are saying to each other, and the best among them is the one who says, we only stayed or lived in the earth only 1 day. إِذْ يَقُولُ أَمْثَلُهُمْ طَرِيقَةً إِلَّا بِثْتُمْ إِلَّا يَوْمٍ. So this thumma, subhanAllah, between life and death, it is very short. It is very short. Which is this reality, this truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala portraying for us in the beginning of Surah Al-Mulk, required to be the way how we perceive things. It required to be our true perception to everything in this life. Because if we do not embrace this perception, then we're going to be deluding ourselves. We're going to be like corrupting ourselves, reality. Then the person who embraced this perception, he will then be in need to correct many aspects in their life, following to find out which are of the action that they need to learn to really implement this perception in their life. So if you know this life is very short, and you know the reason for you to exist in this life, not for this particular life, the only reason for this life is to be tested. So how someone can always, people they look in pursuit of happiness, what happiness can be in the test? Then might not be, the happiness could not exist. The true happiness and joy, the ultimate joy, is in the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're going to confer and grant you the blessing of the eternity. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you for the eternity. Therefore, this perception that is required for the believer to embrace, and they required for the believer to have it being soaked into his and her heart, it is what is going to make you to understand everything happening around you. Without it, we're going to be clueless. Without it, we're going to be filled with anxiety, with depression. Why we do not even determine what is the reality of this life, who you are. We are really, many of the people are oblivious, are subhanAllah neglectful of who they are. So in this beginning, in these two ayah of the beginning of Surah Al-Mulk, define for us the true concept, the true worldview, or the divine worldview of the whole entire existence. Therefore, when you think of it, to test you, whom among you is the best in deeds. So this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. Therefore, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He only had me to live in this life for this aspect, therefore, I'm going to think what I need as action. What I need as action. There's required action. I need a trust in Allah. I need reliance in Allah. I need confidence in Allah. I need yaqeen, certainty. I need, to fulfill and to believe certainly in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because I might be in this very short time, be deluded, be overwhelmed by many difficulties that a person is encountering, that they cannot see the hope, they cannot see the light. And the light is in this ayah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell you how long the life can be is still short, but the most important, you are between 2 points. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَالَ إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ, as being given as the gift to the believer when they're struck by disaster, to say it, you understand that you are from Allah and to Allah we return. So the point of our life is from Allah, and then we return to Allah. Then where is the life? We are from Allah. That's how we get to life, and to whom we return. So the most important thing is the two elements here. From Allah, you trust in Allah, you rely on Allah, you confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and prove patience for the sake of Allah, and to Allah you return. So whatever happened to you on this planet Earth, you're going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regardless to die on someone, around his family, happy, and his people like making dua for them, or subhanAllah to be dying into subhanAllah under bombing, as happening now into our people in Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them, support them, and save them. So this is, dear brother, respected sister, is important for us. Why? Because the next point is, if we embrace this perception, not if we embrace, we have as a believer truly to embrace it, to soak your heart with it, to become your own view, to become your way of thinking, to determine the way how you live your life. Therefore, there is two aspects that we need to understand. The first aspect is the aspect of the ibtila, the trial, and the second aspect is the aspect of the jihad, which is the striving. So are these two elements who determine for us how to implement this perception in a way to be aware and understanding everything around you. When you say understanding, it does not mean like a passive understanding, an understanding that it helps you to increase your iman despite all the difficulty that you're seeing, despite all the hardship that your brother and your sister are going through. The first one is al-ibtila, dear brother, respected sister. When we're talking about the ibtila here are the trial. So we understand the trial is the path to the cleansing, is the path to the purification, is the path to the ridwan Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the pleasure of Allah. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us. Because all your life He said, قَالَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ إِنَّ جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. All the adornment of this earth, all the glittering on this earth, all the beauty you see on this earth, only for one reason, to test you. Therefore, this is the concept of life that everyone, subhanAllah, is heedless of it. Then when you embrace it, you say, okay, so the ibtila is my life. That is my life. What is my life? So what about the joy moment that we have? That's the grant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's with your family, with your dear ones. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you, because it's the house of the ibtila, but as their segment of, of happiness and joy, and only the joy, the true joy, that it really remain despite hardship. People that can go through is your relation with Allah, is the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah made the satisfaction of the hearts to be in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So knowing that, then we need to understand that all our life is a test. All our life is trials, including all the good things that you have in life. So when you say test, people, they always think test about, a problem, disasters, calamities, difficulties. No, all the gift that you have, all the gift of family, the gift of children, the gift of money, the gift of business, the gift, and everything that you gain into your life is a test, is a trial from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at Sulaiman alayhi salam, when he asked the people around him, to consult them and ask them, he said, who can bring me the throne of the queen of Saba? And the Ifrit of the jinn, he said, I can bring it to you before you finish your meeting. Then one of the people who had learned of the book, and he had the knowledge of the book, he said, I can bring it to you in a blink of eye. When he saw the whole, subhanAllah, the whole throne of the queen of Balqis, she was the queen of Saba at the time, in front of him, he was like mesmerized. قال أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك فلما رآه مستقرا عنده قال هذا من فضلي. This is from the grace of Allah. This is from the bounty of Allah. But look, to test me, قال ليبلوني أأشكر, am I going to be grateful or am I going to be ungrateful? قال ومن كفر, whoever will be grateful is grateful for himself, and whoever is ungrateful, he's doing it only, and he should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of need, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ghaniyun kareem, the gracious, the most generous subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam, how Ibrahim get to the high point to be the Imam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala named, to leader of the nations, and make him to be the friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through the series of the commands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him with. قال وإذ ابتلى tested Ibrahim بكلمات, all of these commands, فأتمهن, he fulfilled them all. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala proclaimed him to be the Imam for the قال إني جاعلك للناس إمام, for the whole humankind, as a guide and as an example alayhi salam. So you see, your brother, respected sister, our life is a test. But if we do not look at it from this perspective, then we're going to be lost. Why? Because we are thinking, perceiving things opposite to the truth, opposite to the reality, how it is and defined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whoever will be patient, persevering, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bestow upon him the great gift, as he did for the Prophet ﷺ and the believers. In whatever difficulty someone will encounter, if they persevere and be patient and holding fast to Allah, قَالَ فَانْقَلَبُوا بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ, they always turn away with the gift of Allah, with the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No harm will touch them, and they will be getting the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the result. These are the result. However, there is difficulties or disaster that strike the whole, subhanAllah, nations. It's like what's happening today, the war in Gaza. This is, subhanAllah, is affecting everybody. Because we're talking, this is all ibtila. Our life is ibtila, but there is many types of ibtila. Individual ibtila, community ibtila, specific nation ibtila, and there's the whole world ibtila. Today we are witnessing a whole world ibtila. It's a trial for everybody. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this type of ibtila as a mercy from Him, regardless of what's happening, subhanAllah, regardless of the distraction. But what we are seeing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helping us see what is being manifested as value and virtues that people, they believe that have been erased from this earth. Nobody will have, from non-believer, mostly, to see people have patience like patience of Ayub. Nobody would have thought that people that will have perseverance in the perseverance like these people of Gaza. Nobody have thought that there's people exist that they see everything destroyed and they see still saying Alhamdulillah. This virtue, this qiyam, these great values, people they thought they'd been erased. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them to be manifested as an ibtila, as a test for the whole humankind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us to see the manifestation of His help. And people, subhanAllah, you see them are enjoying and rejoicing the flare, even the flare, the smell of the victory, of the triumph, because the triumph is about in the heart, not in what, subhanAllah, what they have been destroyed by these, transgressors. No, it's not the dunya. There's something else, subhanAllah. People, they feel it. Which is really help us to think of three elements that this ibtila has an impact on every one of us. And especially think of yourself. Because when you're thinking about this perception, think of yourself how you have to reformulate, how you have to restructure your nafs. Because the first element, by seeing such a great value manifested into our reality, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned them in the Quran, the first thing you're going to say to yourself, that this qiyam, that these values had uncovered our inner self. Make us to see ourselves as a hypocrite. Make us to see ourselves that we are far truly from being true servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeing, you say, the patience of those, will you be able to endure what they endured? Are you truly close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are bragging and saying, well, alhamdulillah, I'm near to Allah? What nearness are you defining when you say, I'm near to Allah? Near because you pray 5 prayer, and you think because others they do not pray that you are at the peak of the servitude to Allah? No, seeing to these people, it helps us to look at our inner self. It helps us to uncover our inner self. It's like a true mirror, a mirror of reality that we see it today when you watch it, to see a reflection of who you are, to see a reflection to uncover many of the impediments and many of the shortcomings that we have in ourselves. And it is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you see how bad we are inside compared to this great people. The second element in this manifestation that you're seeing from this great value that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have us to witness on all the broadcasts, not all of course, but on the social media, you see the reality. It give you a new sense of the meaning of freedom. The freedom, it's not freedom like the true freedom, the freedom from the oppression, the freedom of the transgression. You're seeing people fighting for their true freedom. The taste of freedom, the true taste of freedom from oppression, from transgression, from criminal, from killing, from discrimination. That's it, the true freedom. And freedom from such a thing, to liberate yourself from such a thing, that's the only way how you can establish justice and equality on earth. And this is a rahmah from Allah to help people, subhanAllah, reset their understanding of the meaning of the freedom. Because today people, they talk about freedom of sex, freedom of gender, freedom of these things, and freedom. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make to us to see that all these people are hypocrite, because the protagonists of the human rights and everything, they are watching the killing of innocent kids and civilians, and they're still thinking, should we have a ceasefire or not? To understand that whoever still believe in this system, in this ideology, that they are promoting and saying that they are the people who hold the human rights and fight for the human rights, he's a person that they transgressing themselves. They be lying to themselves. Because Allah showed you that the only way of salvation, the only way of establishing that justice and defending the humankind is the way of Allah, not any other way. For the people who think through politics or through activism that they can change things, you say you are dreaming and deluding yourself, because Allah has shown you. And do not be deluded. Do not be someone who's like neglecting the truth in front of you, because if you still keep neglecting, then you only blame yourself in the day of judgment. The third element, dear brother, respected sister, is the reset of the inna, of the fitrah. The reset of the fitrah. This is rahmah from Allah, to see such value. People think that they have been erased. After all, subhanallah, or the bad value, the ill values has been spread all over the society. How our children, subhanallah, they've been instilled in them that, subhanallah, the ill things, the deviation, to subhanallah, to corrupt their inner nature, especially with all this campaign of what we have been witnessing of genders and things. And look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this to happen. Where are they? Where are their voices? Who can speak about such freedom or such equality when innocent kids are dying? This is the reset of the fitrah, the reset of the priority in one's life, to say, subhanallah, this is life. This is what someone needs to live for. This is the justice that someone needs to fight for. This is the freedom that someone needs to fight for. Not things that corrupting the humankind and corrupting the children and corrupting all the next generation. These are rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regardless of what is happening and regardless of the outcome of His coming. But for all of us, it is our ibtila, to stand and to check yourself. The next point is al-jihad. Al-jihad, dear brother, respected sister, is the striving in the sake of Allah. As the test and the trial, subhanallah, encompass all our side or aspect of life, the same for the jihad need to be, subhanallah, encompassing every aspect of your action. Everything. You need jihad in your salah. You need jihad in the tarbiyah of your children. You need jihad in the tarbiyah of yourself. You need jihad in only gaining the halal. You need jihad in your sabr. You need jihad when you're going to face calamity. But is the highest level of the jihad. The highest level of the jihad is to meet an enemy in the battlefield. Why? Because when you see death, it's different. Someone can go, has difficulty, he goes home, he go consult people. But when you are seeing death, as the Prophet ﷺ, they seeing the glittering of the crossing of the sword. That no one, subhanAllah, can imagine it except the one who's in that moment. Therefore, in this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the account of many of the battle of the Prophet ﷺ to be mentioned in the Quran. Why? Because that type of the jihad, where you see like the poor, the true perseverance, the patience, that represent the highest level of the purification of the soul. Many of the companions, they were wishing to be with the Prophet ﷺ because they missed Badr. قال ولقد كنتم تمنون الموت من قبل أن تلقوه. You were wishing martyrhood before you encountered it, but now that you see it, is different. And the person who will stand firm at that position, he become totally different person. He become a true servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them in the line of this ayat. قال وكأي من نبي. How many prophet fought with him, learned, devotee, servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمَا وَهَنُوا لِمَا أَصَابَهُمْ. Look, subhanallah, they didn't lose heart in what they have been, in what it befell on them. فَمَا وَهَنُوا لِمَا أَصَابَهُمْ. In the sake of Allah. وَمَا ضَعُفُوا. They didn't weaken, or they get weakened. قَالَ وَمَا اسْتَكَانُوا. And they didn't show like, subhanallah, weakness. And Allah loves those who persevere and endure patiently. Then, وَمَا كَانَ قَوْلُهُمْ. Look, subhanallah, the high objective is not like to save your life. The high objective is not to save your wealth. The high objective becomes something great, which is related to the perception that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced in the beginning of Surah Al-Mulk. قَالَ, the high objective, Ya Allah, forgive us. وَمَا كَانَ قَوْلُهُمْ. Only they are saying it was, oh Allah, forgive our sins, our excesses. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us firmness and give us victory and triumph over the disbeliever. Why? The disbeliever, the victory, not to celebrate it because you want to have exaltedness on the earth, but the disbeliever, because the only people who spread corruption, the only people who are oppressing, the only people who are pressing transgression. So winning the disbeliever and overcome the disbeliever is for the way to have the justice to be established, to have equality to be established, to bring the way of the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit the whole humankind. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. Adhering to this perception is a must for the believer. It's a must for the believer because it gives you the right guidance, it gives you the right perception, it gives you the right reality. Therefore you'll be seeing things according to the way of Allah. Allah who had the dominion of everything. Therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to judge according to His way, not according to the way of the people. So a smart person, he will really be hastening today to embrace this perception and really to work for it and inquire what type of the action that they need to truly, immerse into the perception and implement in their life, which is really help us to understand the events around us, help us to see the reality, help us to be gifted the criterion that we have been mentioned, in the previous khutbah. Now, when someone does that, he's going to do it by understanding the trials and acting upon it with the issue, with the jihad, with the striving, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These two elements are able to heal the disease of this ummah. What is the disease of this ummah? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, when all the nations, they summon themselves to come, around you as, someone who's calling people for one dish, this is what's happening. So the companion, they said, are we, in small number at the time? He said, the Prophet ﷺ, you will be like in big number, but قَالَ أَصَابَهُمُ الْوَهْنِ, they will be like no power. It's like the foam. They do not have, like the foam, subhanAllah, of the waves, on top of the waves, or on top of the stream, does not have any power, does not have anything, just carrying dirt and impurity. That's how the state of the ummah today. So the healing from this state, from this illness, comes, what is this illness? The Prophet ﷺ, قال أصابهم وهن, the illness is wahan, this weakness, this deep weakness within their soul. What is wahan, Ya Rasulullah? He said, قال, the love of this dunya and the hate of death. Therefore, the healing, when you embrace and adhere to this perception, is going to have you, what empower you is the jihad, is the striving. And this striving help you to have your higher objective, is the pleasure of Allah. Then death, it will be a passage of greatness. Death will be where you're going to have the great glad tidings of all your existence. You will love death, you will not hate it. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purchased from the believer their life and their wealth. In exchange, they will have, the paradise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last point, Allah said in the Quran about the Prophet in the end of Surah Yusuf, حَتَّى إِذَا اسْتَيْأَسَ الرُّسُلُ, to the point that the messenger, they despair. And the people, the believers with the messenger, that they thought that they're not going to receive help. Dear brother, when distress get to its peak, when hardship suffocating the person and make the person not breathing anymore, everything is closed. When someone does not have any atom of power, of patience to just use it, it's at the end. That's what it means, this ayah. The help of Allah will come then. But dear brother, respected sister, do not lose your trust in Allah. Because the key for the relief, the key for everything good from Allah is your yaqeen in Allah, is your certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَالْيَقِينُ مِفْتَاحُ الْفَرَجِ. And this ayah is so powerful to understand that Allah's destiny is about checking your heart, not about the buildings, not about what's happening. Because you're just living half a day after all, if it's not less than that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to the best way and instill in our heart yaqeen and give us perseverance on the path and make us to reset our fitrah according to the way of Allah. Ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم ارزقنا العمل الصالح يا أرحم الراحمين واجعله لوجهك خالصا. اللهم يا أرحم الراحمين ويا أكرم الأكرمين احفظ إخواننا في غزة، اللهم احفظهم بحفظك، اللهم نجهم، اللهم أطعمهم، اللهم أسقهم، اللهم أفرغ عليهم صبرا، اللهم ثبت أقدامهم، اللهم انصرهم على المعتدين الظالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم دمر الظالمين، دمر عتادهم وأولياءهم يا كريم يا رحمن، إنك الواحد القهار، إنك العزيز الحكيم، نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأقم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.